Welcome into Keys to the Crown, presented by Crown Royal, joined by NFL Network's Marcas Grant. I'm Erin Summers. The Fantasy Football Championships wrapped up last week, so we're going to talk about who some of the surprises were this season, Marcus. Any players that went above and beyond stood out to you this year?
The first name that comes to mind is Josh Jacobs with the Raiders, and he played a lot in the very first preseason game, back in the Hall of Fame game. And when he got all those snaps, we all thought, oh no, this means the Raiders are going to trade him. He's going to have a bad year, avoid him in fantasy drafts. And it turns out that after week 17 was over, he was the third highest scoring running back in all of fantasy. He was amazing all season long, so definitely exceeded our expectations. The other guy for me is Geno Smith, who wasn't even supposed to be the Seahawks starting quarterback at the beginning of the year. Then Drew Lock gets hurt. Geno Smith steps in, and he had that great line early in the season. They wrote me off, and I ain't right back, though. So, credit to him for having an amazing year when nobody even thought about him as not only a fantasy prospect, but just as a regular NFL quarterback this season.
Yeah, Geno Smith, I think, was drafted on average around 260 in leagues, and then he ends up being a top 10 quarterback. So very impressive season by him. Players that were just absolute studs day in and day out for you.
Travis Kelce, easily. There was no bigger advantage from one player in fantasy football than Travis Kelce. I mean, he is not only the number one tight end, he is almost 100 points better than the number 2 tight end. That's how good he has been this year. At a time where it's hard to find a quality tight end on a weekly basis, he was the guy that you could sort of set it and forget it every week. I think you could say the same for Austin Eckler, who I'd say he got off to a kind of slow start. I think he went the first 2 games without scoring a touchdown, and people had a mini freak out, and then he just turned it on the rest of the way, and very much is going to be a large part of the conversation for who should be the number 1 overall pick next year.
All right. Well, with that lead in, let's go there. Who are you definitely looking at to pick in the top 10 for next season?
Well, I think Eckler's there. I think Christian McCaffrey is still going to be there. I look at guys like Saquon Barkley, who had a great season this year. I think he jumps into that conversation this season. But I do think we're going to see a lot of wide receivers come off the board in the top 10 next year. Guys like Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp once he's back healthy again, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill. So I think you're going to see some running backs come off the board early, but don't be surprised if you see a lot of wide receivers and maybe even Travis Kelce sneak in there at the back end of the top 10.
No quarterbacks. You didn't name any quarterback.
No quarterbacks. I think you'll see some quarterbacks come off the board, maybe the second round, easily the third. I think, maybe late second round is when you start to see the Josh Allens, the Jalen Hurtses, the Patrick Mahomeses. I don't think people are going to quite make the leap to take those guys in the first round, but if you want those guys, you probably have to look at spending a second or third round pick. Some Saints players that should be on the radar for next season. Of course, Chris Olave, who had the great rookie year, was probably considered a late round draft pick in 2022. Meanwhile, there's Juwan Johnson, who I talked about a lot in this space this year. Nobody was thinking about him coming into the season. Right now, he looks like a high-end tight end 2, maybe even a low-end tight end 1. And even though he's not a top 5 pick like he once was, Alvin Kamara is still going to be on people's radar. Maybe you're looking at him as, say, a third round pick next year, but definitely somebody that's going to be drafted in a lot of fantasy leagues.
Great advice, albeit it's probably far too early to be talking about this. I appreciate it, Marcus. It's been great having you this year, and I guess we'll see you next year.
Hey, looking forward to it.
This has been Fantasy Football Keys to the Crown, presented by Crown Royal.